Hello and welcome to this video, which is about how I made the stomacher for my Arcadian Shepherdess gown. I used Simplicity Pattern 8161, the American Duchess 18th century costume.
The main gown will be its own video, so please ignore any gown construction here. I decided to embellish the front of the gown with robings and pin on a decorative stomacher outside the lacing. To that end, I had to cut down the stomacher to my desired size. On the right is the original from the pattern, on the left is my cut down version. On the fold, I cut out a lining layer from linen. The linen was also used to line the gown bodice. I cut bias strips of satin to bind the edges of the stomacher, the same satin as was used in the petticoat. Then I laid out the linen as a template and cut out the stomacher satin layer. I didn't quite have enough coutil for the two strength layers, but I wanted to stick to using up scraps, so I made do. The edges will have lots of layers, with the satin outer, linen inner, bias binding, and one full coutil layer. And a stomacher doesn't take the strain in the way a corset does. So I marked it out using the correct half of the cardboard pattern pieces, then cut it out. I had my 4 layers and started to consider the lace placement, the same lace as on the petticoat. While I mould, I drew the bone channels onto the full coutil layer. I pinned the lace onto the satin where I wanted it to be. As the lace was not completely symmetrical, it required artful placement rather than scientific. Then I cut off the excess from the sides. With that, all the layers were prepared. I pinned together the coutil layers, then stitched the bone channels with 1.5mm stitches. The linen lining layer was pinned to the coutil, then basted along all but the top edge. I measured and cut the bones. Then rounded the ends and inserted them into the stomacher. I gave the whole thing a steamy press to flatten the bones before we get to the lace. The gold lace was stitched onto the satin, as I had done for the petticoat, going around the whole outline of the lace. I trimmed the edge of the lace where a gold bauble was sitting. I laid the satin and lace layer over the main body of the stomacher and pinned them together. Then I stitched around the edges to hold them in place and trimmed down the satin and lace to match the coutil. The next step was to pin on the bias binding to the lower part. The bias binding was sewn on using a zipper foot, taking care around the gold baubles in the lace. After removing the pins, I flipped the bias binding to the outside and pressed it. Then it was a matter of folding it under on the reverse side and pinning it down. I started symmetrically, securing the bottom on both sides, then working up each side. I flipped it over again and stitched in the ditch. Then removed the pins. Time to finish the upper edge. I trimmed it down . Reinserted the bones, and basted along the edge to hold things together. I pinned on the bias binding and stitched it on. Then proceeded as before and stitched in the ditch to secure.
And here we have the finished stomacher. Ta-da! I'm really happy with how it's come out. The lovely gold lace on ivory satin to match the petticoat. You can see it's pinned onto my stays currently, but it will be pinned on to the gown over the lacing. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you'd care to, please like and subscribe, and next time I'll be moving to the gown itself.